It felt like stepping back in time, like going 30 years into the past. Visiting North Korea definitely changed me. I started trusting YouTube less. It censors anything it doesn't like. The woman works for a tour agency. As for the man, well, I think you can guess.
Vyacheslav traveled to North Korea in June 2025. He's a businessman and a man on a mission to visit every country on Earth. North Korea was his 51st country.
I like seeing the world from all sides. When you travel, you start to realize people everywhere are more or less the same. There aren't good nations or bad ones. Everyone wants the same basic things. But we live by different values.
So when Vyacheslav got the chance to visit North Korea, he didn't hesitate. What struck him first was how different it felt from the rest of Asia. North Korea, he says, looks far better maintained than places like Cambodia, Laos or Indonesia. There's lots of greenery, clean streets and those skyscrapers.
I've heard there were a few, but didn't expect hundreds, and there are many more under construction. What really stood out was the building know-how. I don't even know if we ever had anything like this. It was bizarre. How are they putting up 30 or 40-story buildings with scaffolding and formwork like that?
But let's be honest, visiting North Korea isn't the same as truly knowing the country. Tourists don't have freedom of movement. Another traveler we spoke to came on a work trip, not as a tourist. He says that he faced lots of restrictions and even now he's nervous to speak openly. Though he didn't run into any serious trouble there.
I didn't get a chance to use their public transport because they don't let you use it. This is the same for both buses and subway.
Entering the country is tightly controlled. There are only two ways in, with a group tour or on a private one. Either way, you're assigned a guide and going solo is completely off limits. To visit North Korea, you first have to choose a travel program and book through a licensed tour operator. After that, you can start gathering documents for your visa. But you don't submit a visa application. It's handled by the agency, which must be officially accredited by the DPRK government. Then the North Korean side vets both the tour and the traveler, checking, for instance, whether you're a journalist. Our travelers say that first visit can be pretty intimidating. Imagine landing in a totally empty airport. Right off the plane, security check, then passport control, then another inspection, this time by customs. They match your declarations with your luggage, go through your books and your phone. Binoculars? Totally banned, probably so you don't see too much or get too curious about staying. That said, it's not always the same for everyone.
And I will. Another was asked in Russian about countries they'd visited. Next stop, baggage claim and customs. I'd heard they used to inspect phones thoroughly. This time they barely looked at them. On the plane, they handed out customs forms asking you to list any electronic devices. I wrote down 2 phones and a tablet. Skipped the smartwatch. Felt like overkill. Overall, the process felt pretty formal. Some passengers were asked to show their books and explain what they were.
Once you clear all of that, your guides are there waiting. They usually just smile and say, "Welcome to North Korea." Soon after, sometimes right away, sometimes a bit later, tourists are given a detailed briefing. You're expected to show respect to the great leader Kim Il-sung, dear leader Kim Jong-il, and current leader Kim Jong-un. Sometimes you're even asked to bow to their statues. They also explain how to photograph the monuments properly. First, always shoot from the front. The full statue must be in frame. Second, never crop their faces. Third, know that your photos and your camera might be checked.
They took our temperature. We filled out the customs forms listing all electronic devices, even smartwatches. The process was quick. They brought us to a cafe, then split the group into 3 and sent us off to the hotel. On the way, we talked to our guide. She immediately started sharing stories about how well things are going in the country. There wasn't any real lecture-style briefing. Later, on a trip to the embassy, a diplomat explained a few rules. No photos of military personnel or police. Basically, don't photograph anything related to security. Statues? No outright ban, but they did say not to shoot from the side. Only full-face, full-length photos from the front.
There are statues everywhere in North Korea. In almost every city, you'll find a monument to Kim Il-sung alone or sometimes alongside Kim Jong-il. As of 2020, there was just one exception, the city of Hwaryong. There, the only monument is to Kim Il-sung's wife, Kim Jong-suk. She was born in Hwaryong. There are a lot of rules about these monuments. For example, under Kim Il-sung's instructions, every statue must be placed on a natural or artificial hill, always in sunlight, never in shadow. The idea is that the sun shines brightly on the leaders. Since 1994, the country has also erected eternal life obelisks. By 2013, there were more than 5,800 of them. Each one is engraved with a slogan, "Great comrades Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il are with us forever." Originally, only Kim Il-sung was mentioned. Possibly, after Kim Jong-un's death, his name will be added.
If you're taking a picture near any statue or portrait, you must photograph it full length. Don't crop the image. Never mimic the leader's poses. No silly expressions. Before visiting the bronze statues, we were told to dress respectfully, tie back our hair, wear something formal. They wanted us to look presentable.
In general, tourists in North Korea must ask permission before photographing anything, especially military personnel or government buildings. Experts say enforcement has gotten a little more relaxed in recent years, but it still depends heavily on your guide.
One more restriction: no photography inside shops or markets, especially if something might seem off to foreign eyes. Like in our case, we went into a shop where they sell apples, apple juice, jam, and so on. I tried to take a photo, but was told photography wasn't allowed. I had to put my phone away. One time I was at a market, they have veggie stalls, meat, clothes. I wanted a shot from above. Suddenly, a woman ran over, yelling at me in Korean. Then a man came up, asked to see my phone. Luckily, I deleted the photo in time. Good thing they didn't know about the recently deleted folder on iPhones. He looked, said, "All good," and let me go.
As I said, you can't go anywhere without a guide. Even falling behind your group can cause trouble. At night, tourists are kept in their hotels, usually special ones with a bar, other tourists nearby, sometimes even bowling. But try to step outside, you'll get scolded. Tourists who've wandered off say they're quickly brought back with a polite but firm lecture. Why so strict? Maybe to keep you from stumbling into a Korean Beverly Hills and getting lost. Or maybe Kim Jong-un does have something to hide.
There are always at least two guides, usually one woman, one man.
This is Andrei Lankov, a Korean studies expert and one of the world's top North Korea scholars.
The woman represents the tourist agency. As for the man, well, you can guess who he works for. Then you're taken by private transport to your hotel where they explain the basic rules. I have to say, they explain the rules very politely. They just ask you not to do certain things.
The only person we spoke to who wasn't under a guide's control was Andrei. He didn't have a tourist program, so no one made him follow a schedule. Still, he noticed a man shadowing him and his colleagues, literally walking right behind them.
I didn't stray far from the embassy, but I could move freely. Once, a group of us stopped pretending to take a smoke break, and we noticed a guy in black clothes following us intentionally. They were clearly tracking our movements, not to stop us, but to make sure we didn't try anything unusual. Other than that, we could freely move around the city.
Think that's strange? It's normal in North Korea. For example, a North Korean phone was smuggled out recently. When you turn it on, it shows the national flag, but more than that, the phone censors language. You can't even type South Korea, it automatically changes it to puppet state. And as BBC journalists found, the phone secretly takes screenshots every few minutes. There's no way to know unless you dig deep into the software. The images are saved in a hidden folder that users can't access.
We got our hands on this phone. It was smuggled out last year. This shows just how much North Korea censors information. North Korea blocks information.
Tourists, of course, are also under watch. The main monitors are the interpreter guides. They're with you almost 24/7 for the entire tour. They share only official, vetted facts, enforce rules, solve problems, and stay in touch. This is partly for your comfort, but mostly for control. Often there's also a junior guide nearby, making sure nothing goes off script, though sometimes they relax the rules a bit. Our traveler said that in the evenings, guides would chat informally over tea, asking about life abroad.
There was always a sense of where we were, like it was better not to ask too much. But we did have one-on-one talks about life in North Korea, when people marry, how many kids they have, how they meet each other. Turns out, they date through their own local internet. They even have a dating site.
It's clear all tourists are under close watch, but it's hard to say who's being protected, the tourists from too much truth or the locals from too much curiosity. I think these guides are specially trained, but honestly, it didn't feel oppressive. Our two guides were kind, welcoming. They answered nearly everything, but dodged the tough questions.
Naturally, every tour is tightly curated. Even tourists notice you're shown only the cleanest, prettiest version. In Pyongyang, for instance, no one sees street vendors or poor neighborhoods, but you'll see lots of statues, parks, new buildings, museums, and no time to feel bored. The schedule is so full, you barely have time to think about whether what you're seeing is even real. In North Korea, tourists have no time for unplanned walks. The tour includes everything, 3 big meals a day, Korean, Japanese, and European dishes, entry to museums, excursions, and hotel stays. You might pay extra, up to $40 a day for a single room. Foreigners can get Wi-Fi with access to the global internet, roughly $1.70 to $2 for 10 minutes. Fast enough for WhatsApp calls, but uploading to Instagram, tough. This report comes from Kazakhstan's Kursiv, January 2nd, 2025. Tourists are strongly urged to treat everything the guide says as truth. Off-script questions are unwelcome, especially if they involve history. Guides warn, don't talk about the Kims, don't bring up politics, and never compare the DPRK to South Korea. Religious talk is banned. In communist North Korea, distributing Bibles, icons, or pamphlets is a criminal offense. Several foreigners have already been arrested for missionary work. For example, 75-year-old Australian pastor John Short spent 2 weeks in jail before being deported. A South Korean priest got a life sentence for running an underground church.
If you're coming to North Korea to convince locals that their system is bad or to provoke them into saying something, remember, they pay the price, not you. They can face real consequences. So maybe don't buy that ticket at all. Maybe you'd prefer a country where you can grab a beer and argue politics with the locals. There are lots of places like that. I'd say 90% of countries fit that description. But North Korea is different.
You can't just talk to people on the street. That creates problems for both sides. All interactions are monitored. Your guide will translate formal conversations with museum staff or a farmer at a model farm. Locals are forbidden from chatting with foreigners. It's an unspoken rule, but breaking it brings punishment.
Don't expect casual street conversations. Most locals won't want that. And even if they did, who would allow it? Sometimes you'll be brought to places with lots of North Koreans, like a park. In those rare moments, a little small talk may be possible. If you're in the park, chatting's okay. That's not a problem. Ask anything you like. But if someone doesn't want to answer, they'll either pretend not to understand, respond with official-sounding severity, push back against your provocation, or simply walk away.
The subject of the leaders in North Korea is especially sensitive. Even their images must be treated with respect. Fold a newspaper with a leader's portrait, you've insulted the entire nation. Sarcasm or jokes? Also a very bad idea. You've heard the phrase, walls have ears? In the DPRK, that's almost literal. If a tourist breaks the rules, a guide will usually pull them aside, quietly, no scene. It's believed that guides themselves want to avoid making trouble for the tourist and for themselves. Still, many visitors share similar first impressions. They're struck by how clean and empty Pyongyang feels, very few private cars. And overall, they say Pyongyang looks surprisingly normal. Less ruined than expected, more modern buildings, more smartphones. The city feels clean, green, and modern.
We kept thinking we're just being driven along the same few wide streets, but from different angles. In the center, it's beautiful. Green spaces, skyscrapers, and genuinely impressive architecture. Public buildings, theaters, museums, the House of Pioneers are grand, even elegant. The construction quality is surprisingly good. Unlike most residential housing we glimpsed. We got to drive across the whole city. Turns out, after 11 p.m., Pyongyang's main lights shut off entirely. Until 6 a.m. The city goes dark. We drove to the outskirts of Pyongyang. Immediately, it looked different. One-story houses, clay huts. You could tell that's where ordinary people live. The center, though, was polished. Architecture in the style of modern Asia, somewhere between China and Singapore.
The cult of personality is visible. Some say it's fading. Others note portraits of the Kims are everywhere. Many people still wear pins with the leaders' images, though to be fair, that hasn't been mandatory for over a decade. Back in 1972, every North Korean adult was required to wear one anytime they left the house. Since Kim Jong-un came to power, badges with the leaders' portraits are now only worn by members of the ruling party or the local youth association, the Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il Youth League. Since 2021, it's been renamed the Socialist Patriotic Youth Union.
We visited the bronze statues of the Kims. And yes, we bowed. It wasn't forced. More like a polite suggestion. Stand in a line, please, and bow. No one resisted. What did I feel in that moment? I understood where I was. And just like in any other country, I followed the local customs and bowed. No second thoughts.
Some stereotypes don't hold up. For example, the infamous official haircut list, that's a myth. If you'd like to say something witty about Kim Jong-un's own hairstyle, well, you can. In fact, sarcasm about Kim Jong-un has been banned since 2016.
The haircut list rumor? That's not true. I had this idea, a sort of souvenir haircut from North Korea. And here it is. When I entered the salon, I fully expected to see a wall of approved hairstyles with photos. But nope, nothing like that. The stylist just gave me a haircut we managed to communicate with hand gestures. She didn't speak English. I don't speak Korean.
The biggest contrast was in clothing. Everyone dresses nearly the same. Even hairstyles seem divided by age and gender. Little girls, short bobs. Teenagers, slightly longer bobs. Adult women, long hair either in a bun or a kind of voluminous twist. Women dress nicely but very conservatively. Think Soviet-era strictness. Skirts below the knee, lots of dresses, even traditional style ones. Saw that quite a bit.
All tourists describe North Korea as surreal, but everyone sees it differently. Take Zakar, for example. He says it's a beautiful place, a country without poverty. He spent 4 days in North Korea in spring 2025.
We'd all heard the horror stories a country where people are shot on sight, but after a couple of days, that image starts to fade. You catch yourself thinking, where's everything they warned us about? Everything feels calm. And here's an important thing. North Korea is living better than half the world because half the planet survives on less than $100 a month. I didn't see hunger, no disease, no homeless people on the streets. Everything looked orderly, clean, even cool. Oh, there's no experience quite like North Korea. For one, it was my first time in Asia, but even beyond that, the everyday life there has its own vibe. You can't really compare it to anywhere else. It's a very unusual experience. At times, it felt like stepping back in time. Maybe 30 years back. You see what life looks like with no internet, no modern tech basically.
In Pyongyang, all tour groups visit Kim Il-sung Square. It's the country's main square. Military parades and mass gatherings happen there. Another standard stop is the Museum of Victory in the Fatherland Liberation War. That's where the real performance begins. Guides rotate, and the new ones often introduce themselves as war veterans. They explain North Korea's view on the war and the ceasefire. They talk in detail about US aggression and South Korea's puppet government. It's the DPRK version of history. Naturally, they show everyone the US spy ship Pueblo, which was captured in 1968. Pretty much every tourist sees it. Another must-see is the Kim Il-sung Mausoleum, also known as the Kumsusan Memorial Palace, a massive marble complex where the embalmed bodies of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il lie in state.
How much can a tourist really see? Can they see the real North Korea? Only the showroom version, the side they want you to see. Tourist buses follow approved, pre-planned routes. You won't drive through poor neighborhoods. And yes, those neighborhoods do exist. There are fewer slums than before. North Korea has built a lot of housing in the past 10-15 years, especially in big cities. But those areas are still there. Some look quite grim. Tourists will never see them. Access is restricted.
In Pyongyang, there are model schools, hospitals, and stores set up just for foreign visitors. To show everyday life, they might take you to a vocational school or a pioneer palace. At the end, they often organize a talent show. Kids sing, dance, do crafts, a polished little showcase. But let's not forget, we're talking about a dictatorship. Here, it's not common to complain, especially in front of foreigners. Guides only share the positive. If they take you to a school or kindergarten, they'll be sure to say this was made possible by the personal care of Kim Jong-un. And if they show you a new building, expect a thank you speech for the party. The guides also explain how much the Kims have done, how socialism works, and how amazing it is to live by the principles of Juche in year 114. Yes, you heard that right. In North Korea, it's not 2025, it's year 114. They start counting from Kim Il-sung's birth year. And the thing is, the guides may truly believe everything they say. In some kindergartens, there are rooms dedicated entirely to the biographies of the Kim family. From a young age, children are taught to love their leaders. At the center of these classrooms, there's often a detailed 3D model of Kim Il-sung's native village. Kids are taught to point out where the father leader played, trained, exercised, and prepared for his fight against Japanese imperialists. After lunch, children are expected to bow to a portrait of the leader and chant in unison, "Great leader, thank you for the food." Think that's all? Of course not. That's just a small part of it. Researchers say that in North Korean schools there are 4 full subjects devoted solely to the childhoods of the leaders. The early years of great leader Generalissimo Kim Il-sung, the early years of great leader Generalissimo Kim Jong-il, the early years of beloved Marshal Kim Jong-un, and the early years of anti-Japanese heroine Kim Jong-soo. The first three total 171 hours per year. The fourth gets 34 hours. This level of indoctrination can frustrate some tourists, but it's best not to go against the rules. Breaking them can have serious consequences. A guide is required to report any incident to the authorities. They might let a question slide, but something more, like taking a propaganda poster without permission, that's state property theft. Take the case of Otto Warmbier, an American student. In 2016, he took down a poster from a hotel wall. He was arrested, charged with an enemy act, and sentenced to 15 years in prison camps. While in custody, he fell into a coma. After 17 months, he was returned to the US, but he died shortly after. Cases like that are rare. Usually, serious infractions end with deportation and a canceled tour. But no one wants to find out what life is like inside a North Korean labor camp. Experts agree on one thing. Behind the facade shown to tourists, there is much more. Yes, North Korea has become a little more open, and tourism is growing, but the path to even this small degree of openness has been a long one. For so-called imperialist countries, tourism to North Korea only became possible in the late 80s. Back then, only a few hundred foreigners visited the country each year. By 1988, the number of Western tourists who had visited the DPRK was about the same as the number of humans who had been to outer space. Andrei Lankov is one of the few Russians who not only lived in North Korea, but also studied there as a Soviet exchange student. He's an Orientalist, a historian, and a man who knows more about the DPRK than, frankly, most North Koreans ever will. He's written 16 books and countless academic articles about North Korea. Some call him the leading educator on the North Korean issue. And really, he's one of the few people making this secretive country even just a little more understandable to the outside world.
In practice, North Korea in the 50s, 60s and 70s was a place where extramarital sex did exist, but was extremely rare and never talked about publicly. It was a total taboo. No one wrote about it. No one even hinted it could happen in a proper socialist society like the DPRK. Now in South Korea, where everything is supposedly morally rotten, sure, it was possible.
Lankov wrote his first book on North Korea back in 1985, shortly after he returned home, but it wasn't published until 1991. He first arrived in the DPRK in 1984 and spent nearly a year there studying, observing and gathering material for his thesis.
What struck me the most was how normal it all seemed. Blue skies, people strolling the streets, no machine guns on every corner. At first, it didn't match the image of an all-controlling dictatorship that he and everyone else had grown up with.
After the collapse of the USSR, North Korea lost its main sponsor and fell into deep crisis. And oddly enough, this is what pushed the country to start developing tourism. In 1998, Pyongyang cautiously opened its doors, even to some capitalist neighbors. In 1998, North Korea launched a special tourist program for South Koreans, their arch-ideological enemies. It was actually funded by Hyundai, with full support from the South Korean government. Between 1998 and 2008, tens of thousands of South Koreans visited North Korea, though they were only allowed into a carefully controlled, restricted zone. The project was shut down after a change of government in Seoul when conservatives took power. From the early 2000s, North Korean authorities began targeting tourists from the West and from China, and that's when the first real tourism boom began. For comparison, in the year 2000, about 130,000 foreigners visited North Korea. By 2012, that number had grown to 250,000, but only 5,000 to 7,000 of them were Western tourists, Russians, Europeans, Americans. The vast majority were from China.
Mostly people from northeastern China, those who suddenly had a little more money and a little more free time and wanted to go abroad. But going far, that's expensive. And it takes time. North Korea was a little piece of abroad right next door. Some went out of curiosity because North Korea, with its propaganda slogans, portraits of leaders and widespread poverty, especially in the provinces, reminded them of China in the 60s and 70s, a kind of nostalgia trip.
This trend continued until 2020, when the borders slammed shut due to the COVID pandemic. 4 years later, North Korea has slowly begun letting in small tourist groups again. According to UN Human Rights Commissioner Volker Turk, life in the DPRK is, quote, a daily struggle devoid of hope. In 2024, restrictions on movement inside the country have become even tighter, and border control has been further reinforced. Leaving the country is nearly impossible without government permission. According to the UN in 2023, just 200 people managed to escape. Each case was unique, but the reason behind them is the same. The human rights situation is horrific. The death penalty still exists and is actively used. Execution is by firing squad, punishable offenses, watching a Western TV show, wearing blue jeans, or even sunglasses. There are 16 crimes in North Korea that can legally result in execution. The total number of executions is unknown. The country is too closed off. Occasionally, details surface through South Korea's Ministry of Unification. One report mentioned a 22-year-old man from South Hwanghae province who was publicly executed for listening to 70 K-pop songs, watching 3 films, and sharing South Korean media. Experts say the effects of the crackdown are visible to the naked eye. Most people wear only work uniforms, avoid any kind of accessory, and try not to stand out at all.
Just look at their clothes. In Pyongyang, for example, many people are dressed pretty well. But in North Korea, you'll see people who look like they spend their spring planting rice and their fall harvesting it on government labor mobilizations. It's not just rice, you see signs of all kinds of farming, and it shows on people's skin. If you spend a month every year working under the blazing sun, with water reflecting sunlight up from the fields, your skin will tell the story.
Despite all this, Vyacheslav believes that North Koreans are happy people, but only because of propaganda, which in North Korea works very, very well.
Their propaganda is simple, designed for the average person. In the West, we're used to a more polished media, more nuance, more packaging, but the message underneath is often the same. Still, there's something real there, a genuinely cohesive society. I saw it myself at the airport. Locals were flying out to Russia, presumably for work or assignments, not tourism. And they were crying, waving goodbye, many of them. It was real. No cameras, no one filming. People on the street just live their lives. They say the happiest societies are in Finland or Denmark. I'm not so sure. Maybe North Korea.
If you ever travel there, meals are included in the tour package. Usually lunch and dinner at restaurants in the city. Tourists are served the best available food. Meat, fish, rice, vegetables, plenty of it, but not much variety. Sometimes they offer local delicacies like Pyongyang cold noodles or Korean BBQ, but surprisingly often it's European food, pizza, pasta, and the like.
Of course, there was also a lot of local cuisine, but almost all of it is meatless. Nuts, wild greens, cabbage, rice, lots of it. Everything is spicy. Their drinks? Mostly Chinese brands. They're kind of odd. At the embassy, we ate food that felt closer to what you'd find in Russia. But out on the streets there are plenty of restaurants with local food. It was unusual, hard for many to get used to. Most missed the familiar meat dishes.
But But locals don't have those options. According to the UN, North Korea now faces unbearably harsh living conditions. Human rights organizations say, quote, many people simply have nothing to eat. The cause? A rigidly centralized system of food production and distribution. Expert Andrei Lankov disagrees. He says empty shelves are a myth. Though yes, serious food shortages did happen as recently as 2018. Even South Korean studies confirm it. Under Kim Jong-un, North Korea has seen steady economic growth, mostly in Pyongyang and a few large cities, but where it shows clearly. Before the 2010s, North Koreans barely had appliances. Now, in Pyongyang, 2 out of every 3 households own a refrigerator. In the countryside, it's more like 1 in 3. Still a big change. Phones? Same story. They're not counting smartphones, but landlines. Now, even smartphones have spread. A quarter of the population has one. So no, people aren't starving en masse, at least not in the capital. But luxuries like imported coffee or chocolate are still for the wealthy few.
All this talk about empty shelves, I don't buy it. There haven't been empty shelves in 20 years except in stores for foreigners. Yes, things have gotten harder lately. You might see shortages here or there. But if you have money, you can buy almost anything. The problem is, you might need a lot of money. Yes, you'll see bananas and pineapples in the shops, but they're not for 50%, maybe not even 10% of the population. Still, stores have more or less everything. Want an electric scooter? Buy an electric scooter. Want a can of fish? Buy a can of fish. Meat too, if you can afford it. If you don't have money, that's your problem.
Our guide Andrei spent a month and a half there and managed to see a bit of the real North Korea. At first he was impressed by the capital, but it didn't last. Because outside of Pyongyang, the beauty ends. The farther you drive, the more poor settlements you pass.
We drove to the outskirts of Pyongyang. Immediately, it looked different. Low clay houses, one-story huts. It's clear, this is where ordinary people live. All that beauty, that sleek, modern Asian architecture is for the center only. Looks like somewhere between China and Singapore. There's a district in the center, maybe just one block with 25-story towers lined up in rows. Looks modern, almost like it's not North Korea at all, but step a little outside that block just to the city's edge and it turns into a village. One-story clay houses, kids running around, ordinary people living simple lives. Pyongyang lives the best. Then there's a big gap and a few more cities catch up, mostly border towns. The most prominent is Sinuiju and the Raisin Special Economic Zone. Then come the second-tier cities. And finally, the small towns, the villages. That's where life is the hardest. NW1. And finally, the small towns, the villages. That's where life is the hardest. The gap in living standards is huge. Moving to a better place isn't easy. You need government permission to change residence. You also need permission to get a job in the new city. It's a long process. Still, some people find a way. Those who are more energetic, resourceful, or simply more determined. But for the majority, moving from a rural area to a city is nearly impossible. A typical regional city in North Korea often looks like a half-abandoned town. You can tell right away it's part city, part village. People look simpler. There are fewer cars, and those that are there are old and run down. The roads are worse too. One thing really stuck with me. Leaving Pyongyang, you hit a toll road. I think it was $5. And it's awful, terrible condition. The distance was just 150 kilometers, normally a 2 or 2.5 hour drive. It took us 4 hours. We had to drive at 5 kilo an hour sometimes.
Others also saw beyond wealthy Pyongyang into its suburbs and provinces. They weren't impressed, though they admit even this might have been part of a carefully managed tour.
Everything we visited was planned in advance. We couldn't go off script. Once, we left the subway and someone asked to use the restroom, and even that had to be cleared. And it was just a regular public restroom at the subway exit. But the guides got nervous about this tiny deviation from the schedule. They probably weren't supposed to let tourists use that toilet. Maybe the conditions weren't great, but the tourists insisted.
You could also see the real North Korea out the bus window, driving from Pyongyang to the mountains or provinces. It was a completely different world. Just fields and not a single patch of land was empty. Everything was used for agriculture, for crops. Most of the population works in the fields, and they work by hand. There are barely any tractors or machines.
Is North Korea just a showcase for tourists? The answer is yes and no. Some tourists, like Zakar, believe the showcase is just liberal propaganda. Others, like Mikhail, see it as a genuine desire to make a good impression.
I saw nearly every street in Pyongyang. We drove to Kaesong for many kilometers on the open highway. I just can't imagine they could have staged all of that. Of course, some parts were clearly for tourists, like circus shows and elegant dinners at restaurants, but there was no lying, no obvious fakery. I never felt like we were being fed a propaganda set. Every country wants to show its best face to the world. In North Korea, this idea is taken to the level of a ritual. In other countries, people are more relaxed about it. They may even see it as a positive trait, but they don't bother too much, and that shows in their level of service. But in North Korea, the service was surprisingly high quality.
Congrats! You've completed your trip to North Korea. You didn't offend anyone. You didn't end up in a camp. Already, that's an achievement. But don't relax. Just yet the final hours are no less tense than your arrival. On the way out, there's another round of strict customs and passport control. The authorities are afraid that tourists might sneak out with something forbidden, like, say, North Korean currency. They'll likely open your luggage, ask you to unfold clothes, and show what's inside your cosmetic bags. They also check your gadgets, phones, cameras, laptops, memory cards. They're looking for photos of military sites, construction zones, poverty, or disrespect towards the leaders. Experts say thorough inspections have become less common, but the risk is still there, especially if someone catches you filming something you shouldn't. But in the end, most tourists leave feeling satisfied.
What stood out most to me was this one thought. What is happiness? What is unhappiness? When you live in a closed society, you don't compare yourself to the world, you compare yourself to your neighbor. If your neighbor doesn't have a refrigerator and you don't either, you don't feel miserable. But I can't imagine living without a fridge or without an aircon. It's hard to picture, but they live without it, and it doesn't bother them at all. My final feeling? Actually, a good one. It was a strange experience, but it was interesting. Would I go back? Probably not. At least, not for that long. Maybe as a tourist I would. It's a perspective worth seeing. But I was left with a pleasant impression. The authorities just want to be sure that no tourist, even if they only saw the official version, managed to capture anything that might damage North Korea's image abroad or accidentally reveal a state secret. It's the first thing that worries them most. They want all the photos to look harmless enough. Although, to be honest, the inspections are pretty surface level, easy to get around.
Once you cross the border, you can breathe and start thinking about your experience. And it's different for everyone. Some feel sorry for the guides stuck in a dictatorship. Others say they'll trust YouTube and liberal media less.
After I left North Korea, I didn't feel that rush of freedom people talk about. Honestly, I felt kind of sad. Because our guides, they were great people, funny at times, curious, insightful. And now I can't even talk to them anymore. With most people, you can connect later, find them online, maybe even become friends. But here, that's impossible. And honestly, there was a kind of sadness, the realization that I'd never see these people again.
The trip to North Korea changed me, for real. Now I trust YouTube a little less. I'll rely more on what people have actually seen, on people who've been there, on my own experience. Even my view of freedom has changed, because there are free countries and the pseudo-sovereign ones. Free ones act independently, not afraid of anyone. even when maybe they should be, and yeah, maybe money was offered, but still everything was good, beautiful even. Honestly, North Korea is one of the best places I've been to in terms of soulfulness, sincerity, and just what I saw with my own eyes.
And that's it from me. So what can we say in the end? North Korea is still one of the most closed, most controlled countries in the world. Tourist routes are strictly planned, every step is guided, no contact with the outside world, everything feels scripted, perfected, the monuments, the museums, the ideological lectures, the polished model sites. And yet, despite all that, almost every person in this film says they saw more than just a showcase. Behind the facade, ordinary people, ordinary life. Just like everywhere else, I'm hoping for more openness. The most fascinating moment in North Korea will be when the Kim regime is gone and the country finally opens up to the world. That's when it'll get interesting. Let me know in the comments. Do you agree? Thanks for watching. See you soon.